So on to some juicy halachot of Leshon Hara. Mentioned last week that given the security situation in Israel, we mentioned both the importance of guarding your tongue at times of judgment. So when we have soldiers, police officers, and unfortunately citizens in harm's way, we have to be very careful about how we conduct ourselves and how we engage in the inevitable debates and discussions and arguments that are just natural to situations like this. Sorry, we pointed out last week the Gemara and its comment about David HaMelech, who was big a tzaddik as he was, used to lose soldiers when he went to war, and Ahav, being one of the only kings, the most wicked king we probably ever had, Captain Ahab. But he never, we don't find that he lost any soldiers throughout his entire life, his entire military career. And the Gemara says the difference was that David HaMelech, apparently his soldiers, at least there was a number of them who spoke Leshon Hara, who managed to denigrate and fight with each other, whereas Ahav, although they were worshipping idols, they had a better etiquette about it. They just kept to their own business, because Adam will tell you they were libertarians. They didn't really get involved in everybody else's issues. They just lived and let lived, laissez faire, laissez passer. So we have this very, very important filter that we have to pass everything that we have to say about other people through, which is not that it's forbidden to talk about other people. In fact, it's fun. It's just that you have to be very, very careful about making negative comments or criticizing other people where you might run the risk of Leshon Hara. So how do we define Leshon Hara? In its most unadulterated, its purest form, okay, Leshon Hara is saying bad things about people that you don't like. It's a very, very simplistic kind of reductio ad absurdum, essence of Leshon Hara. But it's not a bad working definition. There are lots of details to it. The problem with Leshon Hara is like the problem with everything else in halakha, which is that it's inescapable that you cannot be strict without being lenient. Okay? Everywhere in halakha, know that this is the reality. Being strict on one thing means you're being lenient on something else. Right? We mentioned Europe before, and their genetic anti-Semitism. So, to make an example of the socialist economy, if you really want to be sensitive to people's needs, and you want to give everybody free education and free healthcare and free unemployment and free social security and free everything, so you're basically going to be very lenient with the income that people earn by opening businesses or working for wages. So I want to help a certain group of people. Obviously, another group of people is going to be paying for it. We're not going to say it that way, but that's what we mean. So anywhere in an economy where you try to favor one group or you try to help someone, really you're going to hurt someone else. Maybe we make some of these sacrifices voluntarily, maybe we don't, but that's what you have to be careful about. Think of it in those terms. It's a zero-sum game. You take money from me and you give it to him or to her. I don't know if that makes you a tzaddik or rasha or somewhere in the middle. It's not so clear. So if you want to be strict in the halakha, right, and it is very often a zero-sum game. I'm so strict that I don't talk about other people. And if I know that one of my good friends is going out with a guy who beat up his first wife, it's not nice to talk about people, and God forbid I should, speak Leshon Hara, and we'll see, maybe he's changed, maybe he's reformed, maybe he's been to rehab, maybe he doesn't do drugs anymore. In fact, I just recently ran into someone, it was one of my first gitin, a woman whose husband was flying on drugs, and she didn't know, so he started saying some very weird things and behaving strangely, and sleeping with knives under his pillow. So he started hallucinating, it became a problem. So, if you want to be so strict that you don't talk about other people, you're going to end up being very lenient where there are situations of harm or damage that are going to be caused, and you could have prevented them if only you knew what you could and couldn't say or what you could and couldn't do. Maybe you're obligated. Maybe there's a moral imperative that you get up and say something in order to prevent such damage. How about you have a situation where two people are going to go into business? Actually, there was a situation like this that I knew. I had a relative who had a really, really good friend, a guy that he knew from childhood. They were in the same grade, they went to the same school, they served in the same place in the army in Israel, and they both came to America. This guy ended up going into business as a partnership with, I don't know how I met this guy, a guy who was older than him by almost 20 years. That guy invested, this guy was doing more of the work, something to do with perfumes or colognes. And when the business started to get a little bit weak, my relative's friend decided that he's just going to steal all the money, go to the bank, write one big check to himself, close the account, and take off. So that was bad enough. My relative didn't know about it at the time, he found out about it later. But the same guy moved to Israel and opened a business with somebody else that my relative knew as well. And here he's saying, should I say something? Should I not say something? I'm not going to say anything. Yeah. Maybe he learned his lesson. Maybe he reformed. Maybe he did teshuvah. Kelly's upset.
No, I don't think it's really Leshon Hara if you prevent someone from doing business or having like a moral issue with someone else. It's like it's more a duty than.
Maybe it's a mitzvah. Maybe it's actually a good thing that you save someone from damage, from loss, from grief, from all this suffering. So this relative of mine, who is not an especially observant man, he decided, it's not so classy to talk about people like, let's just let nature take its course and whatever. And he did the same thing to the other guy. They went into business, and he lied, he cheated, he stole a whole bunch of money, he left the other guy without anything, and it was very hard to prove that he did it because legally he had the right to sign checks and So you could have prevented all this damage, you could have prevented all this heartache, all this suffering, so you really have a responsibility. By the way, it's true not only in financial terms, it's obviously true when it comes to life and death situations where, we're allowed to kill someone in order to save somebody else. Think about that. Right? If I see you chasing any one of you, and I love you all, if I see any of you chasing after somebody else with a knife, and it appears to me that there is no moral justification for this, I could probably kill you too. Maybe I'll shoot first and ask questions later, but you can save somebody by.
Do you actually have a gun? Do you actually have a gun?
You want me to answer that question now? So my parents have guns, man, both of them. So you can. Doesn't that make you feel safe though? Not if somebody were to break in, that we'd have some. Just saying. Anyway.
I have swords on my wall.
Yeah.
Swords aren't here.
They're very helpful.
Okay, next time I'll bring them.
But this is basically the question. It comes up very often in Shidduchim. That's really the classic example. Someone that I know wants to go out with, or I'm thinking of setting up someone, and where do you draw the line? Oh yeah, sure, you want to go out with this girl we went to high school. She was a real clown in high school. I don't know what she's like now, but she used to make jokes and bother the teachers. And there's got to be a limit somehow. Statute of limitations. So, the details as brought forth from the Chafetz Chaim, and he really tends to be relatively strict, and it's very hard to fault him for that because probably most of what people say about other people not really so nice or so necessary. So the details that he brings up. Number one. Having personal feelings against someone makes this situation more complicated, and there are two ways around this. Number one is you can say, look, I'm personally involved in this situation, so maybe I'm not the right person to ask. Like, if I'm the first wife that was abused by this guy, and someone comes and asks me, what do you think about him? So, a little bit hard for me to be objective. Maybe you want to talk to someone else. Maybe you can refer.
I'm not going to say anything. Just look at the scars.
Maybe you want to refer, someone to a professional. Maybe
Even
it's a
when
public
you say
court
that,
case.
can you
it's a bit.
the fact that you refrain
It's pretty
from
clear.
saying something means
Right.
that there is something bad to be said.
I remember my father when
Not
he was in business. There was a woman that worked for him. He left one company and she wanted to come work for him in the other company, and she made a very rash decision. I don't know why. She just got up one day. She said she demanded like twice her salary, and he said, "I don't think we can do this." And she left and she went to work for she wanted to go to work for someone else. The other person she goes to work for calls up the company and says, can you serve as a reference for this woman? So my father told me that the guy who handled the human resources in this company, he said that, in the industry you have to be very careful. Like, if you say something really negative about her and she doesn't get a job because of you, she'll sue you. Maybe she's right, maybe she's wrong, but it's just a headache. You don't need these headaches. So he said, when someone calls for a reference, the industrial standard is that if you have positive things to say, you say them. If you don't have positive things to say, you confirm the dates of their employment. Like, the worst thing that someone can say about you, if you call as a reference, would be, I can confirm that Rosemary worked here from September of 2003 to December
September
of
2003.
Something like that. I'm like, well, was there some kind of a problem? Was there some kind of an issue? So I can confirm that she worked here from. It's like that's all I'm authorized to say, and it says
And that's
a lot.
that's implicitly understood.
Correct. She can't sue you for it because all you did was confirm that she worked there.
Yeah,
But it doesn't.
Parents joke around that there's certain signs when someone's giving a reference and they say, good is not the word to describe this candidate. Or this person fills a much needed gap. Or things like that.
Right. Sounds like you're working for the government.
Right.
So you have to be very careful about these things. If you have some kind of a personal negi'ah, what we call in Hebrew, it touches you personally, or it involves you, or you're kind of inextricably related to the story, then you have to be super extra sensitive. The advice given by the Chafetz Chaim in a situation like this, just to recuse yourself wherever possible. If you can say, look, I shouldn't be talking about this. I remember once I was talking to my attorney, a guy that I was working with back in the day. I had a problem with a place that I took a car to get fixed, and then he fixed one thing and he broke something else. So he says to me, where was this place? I said, it was here, and Route 4, so-and-so. He says to me, I can't talk to you about this anymore because that guy's a client of mine. So I said, well, let me just ask you a technical legal question. Like, don't even ask me a technical legal question. I refuse to get involved at all. Call anyone else that you want. Don't talk to me because I'm personally involved with the guy. So he was very, very professional about it. Basically said, I can't give you advice because I can't. My job is to serve this person and help him, and not to. You want to take him to court, I'll be the one representing him, and you can say whatever you want. So, in the event that you have negative feelings about someone, and they might be justified negative feelings, by the way. They might be perfectly justified feelings.
But if you're the only one to know,
so here.
that's your situation.
Right. Here's the workaround. So, either you say, you can be straightforward, and you can say, look, what you're going to hear from me is from my experience with this person. Maybe other people will tell you something else, but and then just to prevent things in as factual a way as possible. So you can say, look, when we were married, he was taking drugs. Now that he's gone through rehab, maybe he won't behave the same way. What do you want me to say? I don't know. I can only tell you what I know and what I experienced. It would be irresponsible of me not to tell you there were problems, but for me to tell you that, he's the worst guy in the world, maybe coming from me. At least you should know where I'm coming from. You should know why I'm saying what it is that I'm saying. So being straightforward about what it is that your experience is with this person is very helpful. It's very meaningful. So at least this way I have a filter. I can say, okay, that's what she said. That's because that's what she thinks, because that's what she went through. Maybe I'm open to something else. If you have no personal feelings, right, which might mean you're over this completely. I'm not looking to damage this person. I'm not concerned. One of the examples given, the Zohar Kodesh makes a very compelling case about this, by Penina and Chana. So Penina is married. She has 10 children. Chana doesn't have any. They're both married to Elkanah. And Penina, we're told, the Pasuk tells us very literally, that she used to anger her. She used to torment her in order to, like in order to make her pray, in order to make her out of despair, out of pain, to turn to Hashem and to pray, which in a way can sound like something very positive. I don't know that I'd want this done to me, but it sounds like her intentions were good. And then we find out that Penina lost a few of her children. So why did she lose a few of her children? So the Zohar asks the question. It's a very compelling question. If what she was doing really L'Shem Shamayim, like for God's sake, she was doing it for the right reasons, then why did she lose children? And if it was a negative thing to do, why does the Pasuk describe it as if it were something seemingly positive? So Zohar explains, because this is the way Leshon Hara works. Normally you get some kind of a permit, you get some kind of authorization to do something, and then Leshon Hara, he gets his boot in the door, and then he also starts to do what he wants. In other words, she started with good intentions. She started with the best of intentions. I'm trying to help the situation. You can see me and my kids. I'm not hiding them. I want you to see my children. I want you to see what it's like to have children. You should really want this. You should pray, and you should cry, and you should go through all this in order to hopefully get your prayers answered and to merit what it is that I have. The problem with that is that once the floodgates are open, so to speak, it's very, very difficult to be diligent about what you're saying and what you're not allowed to say, or how far you should go, or when it's enough. I mean, if already she's crying, probably you went far enough, if not too far. How much further than this you need to go is a tough question.
But why should the children be punished for what the parent did?
That's another good question. We normally, Shaul HaMelech also had sons that were hanged. I mean, he was already dead at the time, so it's a little bit easier. Meaning, you wonder how. So it could be that the children had something to do with it. It could be that they themselves bragged about it. Elkanah gave her portions for each one of her children. So I don't know. Maybe the kids themselves got a little bit arrogant about it. It's hard to say. But as a parent, it's definitely no gift that you should lose children. It's a very painful thing. So apparently there's a little bit of, they call this in the insurance terms, contributory negligence. Like negligence on both sides that contributed to the accident. Could be the kids were complicit, or they were old enough to know what they should do otherwise and didn't say anything. So you have to be very careful. If you're in a situation where you're a little bit more neutral, maybe it's a friend of yours that was affected, or someone that you know, or someone you used to work with, or a colleague, or a neighbor, or a roommate, or whatever. So already, you have, on the one hand, access to more sensitive information, and therefore your information might be very, very helpful when it comes to resolving certain situations or preventing bad ones from developing. As long as you don't have any negative feelings about the person, and you don't genuinely want to harm them, what you're saying is not by definition Leshon Hara. Okay? If you really hate someone and you want this person to suffer and you want this person to fail, you probably shouldn't be talking about anybody. I mean, it's just the nature of Leshon Hara that it's such. Wherever possible, the Mishnah wrote the Chafetz, well, in this case we call it the Chafetz Chaim. It's the same rabbi, Rav Yisrael Meir HaKohen Kegen, wrote the Mishnah with the Chafetz Chaim. So wherever possible, when you have something to say, you try to do it anonymously. Right? We started talking about this last week as well. Nonetheless, you find there are certain situations where the name itself is a crucial feature of the story. So either it's something so public, there's no way to hide it, like the president did something, the president expects whatever he or she does to be private and to stay that way. But there are situations in which mentioning someone by name is actually extra helpful. It's very useful because it gives you some kind of a measuring stick. It's something that you can compare and contrast with. Classic examples that we gave are critiques that you find of Chazal, levied against important personages in the Tanakh. So, for example, Yosef HaTzadik used to style or play with his hair, used to beautify himself. So, living in New York in the 21st century sounds to us perfectly normal that men should spend as much time and money on cosmetics as women do, but back then it was considered something a little bit unusual. So, why would Chazal make such a mention of such a thing? Isn't it by definition negative? So why would they criticize someone that we know, if not personally, that someone that we've heard of? We have a Mishnah that talks about Shimshon HaGibor, right? Shimshon himself, we're told that he went after his eyes when he married two non-Jewish women, and so why would he do this? In the end, he died pretty much as a direct result. So having that information, this Chafetz Chaim makes the point that only when you can relate to a situation without any negativity. I have nothing against Shimshon HaGibor. On the contrary, 99% of what he did was super positive. It surpasses anything that I'll ever be able to accomplish in my own life. But this one thing you shouldn't learn from him. Maybe it's even more dangerous because you know that he was a very righteous man. You would think, I should emulate everything that the man did. Every single thing that he did, I should try to copy. And it's even more dangerous because it's someone that's otherwise considered a role model or someone who's considered a hero. We have to be that much more cautious about not copying everything that he did. So maybe it's a little bit more compelling. And maybe therefore I don't have to put on Facebook every imbecilic thing that one of my kids does, because don't worry, nobody's going to try to copy them or imitate them. They're not yet role models for society. They've got some work to do. But it's not to say that there's nothing we can say or do about public figures. On the particular topic of, let's say, people in public policy, legislators, members of Knesset, Parliament, etc. Here there's a separate issue, and one of the potential issues, especially regarding this particular situation in Eretz Yisrael, is that it really touches on life and death situation, right? The policies that we make and the decisions that we make as a nation, whether or not we allow Arabs free entry into Israel, whether or not terrorists... Did you know up until last week that terrorists who were injured and disabled in the act of carrying out a terrorist attack, like they were shot by a police officer or by a soldier, they were still eligible, forget the medical treatment, they were still eligible for disability insurance from Bituach Leumi. Do you understand this? Wow. You realize what a state, and I talk about socialism and you ask me why I make faces. Do you realize that we used to pay with taxpayer money disability insurance to terrorists who blew up buses and didn't kill themselves in the process. People who got shot and can't work, they were disabled or handicapped or partially paralyzed, and we used to pay for the rest of their lives. We used to pay for this. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. These are the kinds of things that we need to have open discussions about. So if someone goes on public record and says, sure, why not? We live in a liberal society and we should be supporting everybody who has any kind of disability, even if he brought it upon himself while trying to kill me. Okay, I'm perfectly entitled to debate that opinion. It's okay to mention such a person by name. It's not illegitimate of me to point out that that's insane, that has crazy consequences, that's likely to do damage, material damage to real people. We can do such a thing also when it comes to spirituality. The example that we gave last week was this now infamous, notorious rabbi from Washington, D.C., who had a little bit of a mikveh issue, webcam that he put there. So something that's so spiritually damaging, the Gemara itself has a very fascinating statement. And by the way, follow me carefully here, because we're not Catholics. This isn't the infallibility of the Pope. The comment made by the Gemara is that wherever you find a desecration of the name of God, wherever you find a chilul Hashem, en cholkin kavod. Okay, we make no pretensions, we pay no formalities. When someone does something that's publicly disgraceful, it's our job to publicly excoriate them. It's our job to distance ourselves from them and to make it very clear to Jews and non-Jews alike that we completely reject behavior of this nature. Right? If you want to see the beautiful difference, one of the many beautiful differences between the Jewish nation in Israel and the Palestinian society, we as a society, every time there's even a suspicion that a Jew attacked an Arab, outside of the military or police, where it's not really attack, it's self-defense, you'll find 5 million condemnations on social media the same day. Who could do such a thing? Jews don't do such a thing. We condemn this, we speak against it, we don't believe it should happen. You remember that story about that Arab family, what was it, Duma, that village where there's somebody set an Arab house on fire, a baby died, and later the father died. And by the way, there's still no suspect. People just assumed it was a Jew who did it. That same family was involved in a feud with another Arab family from the same village for 15 years. So it's not clear at all what happened there. Right away, they're looking for a Jew to hang. How could Jews do such a thing? It must have been settlers. Calm down, relax. They haven't found a suspect just yet. If it was that easy, they might have. I don't know. In the end, it might be a Jew. If it was a Jew, it's a terrible thing. Jews don't do things like this. That's not entirely accurate. Shimshon HaGibor, when he was fighting the Palestinians of his time, Philistines to be more linguistically precise, he did take 500 foxes and light their tails on fire and set them through fields of grains. I mean, he did terrorize them a little bit. He had lost a bet also because he gave them this riddle to solve about this beehive that he saw in the carcass of a lion. And they tortured his wife and they threatened to burn her inside her house with her father inside. And he said that if he wins, they were going to give him 30 suits and 30 sheets for the bed, and that if he loses, he'll buy each one of these 30 Philistines a suit and a bedspread. So they tortured his wife and they cheated in order to get the answer. So he went out and he killed 30 Philistines and he gave them their bloody suits. I mean, okay, so I'm not saying this is necessarily the right way or the wrong way to deal with certain situations, but seeing as how this is very negatively viewed nowadays, we're the first ones to condemn. We're the first ones to say this shouldn't be done. So if you want to point to someone who did something wrong and say this person did something irresponsible or dangerous, or this person endangers people's lives, there's nothing wrong with doing it as long as what was done was in public. And I mentioned last week, there's discussion about this concept of what's considered public and what's not. The language of the Gemara is very cryptic, a little bit difficult to understand. The Gemara says that anything that was done or said in the presence of 3 people, it was publicized in the presence of 3 people, is no longer eligible for consideration as Leshon Hara. Meaning, if someone did or said something in front of 3 other people, it's already considered public knowledge. The Chafetz Chaim is very strict on this, and he says, really, that's only if it was done in such a way as to indicate that the person who did this or said it wanted it to be public. So if today I record a rant and I put it on YouTube, probably I'm not trying to keep it very secret. So unless I put privacy settings on it or made like password access, so Anybody who wants can see it. You can go ahead and reproduce such a thing, or you can refer to it, or quote it, or critique it openly because it was meant to be public. Back in the day, you didn't have YouTube. What you had was very unreliable, disloyal people. So what does it mean that I did something in front of 3 people? If automatically something happens in front of 3 people, it's considered as if it's public, even if these 3 people are normal, dependable people that otherwise wouldn't go around, revealing secrets, then maybe it's just the fact that there are 3 that it's assumed I want everyone to know. And here the Chafetz Chaim says, but if I told you explicitly, all 3 of you, I don't want anyone to know this, maybe that shouldn't be the case. Or perhaps it's the fact that you did something in front of 3 people, chances are one of them is not going to keep a secret. Like statistics, you're playing the odds. I told 3 people. By doing so, it must be that one of these 3 people is going to tell someone else, and the Facebook effect. Everybody likes and shares, and it's over. So, one way or the other, if something is done or intended for public consumption, like it was said on a microphone, we have no choice but to assume that the individual who said it wants this to be a matter of public record. For better or for worse, if a politician makes a statement and says, I believe this should be the policy. By the way, they've gotten more aggressive about that now in Israel. Some of these motions being put forward are actually to revoke citizenship or to revoke certain rights for people who engage in open acts of terror. They're talking about the death penalty again, right? Imagine that. The only person who ever received the death penalty in Israel was Adolf Eichmann.
There was another one.
He was executed officially by the state.
I forgot the name of it.
By hanging.
I don't remember what it was. I think it was firing squad.
I know they executed other people. There have been assassinations, but
There was one. I'll get the name.
Eichmann is the only guy that I know that was actually officially executed by a court. I know the guy who killed him. The Taimani guy. No, his son lives in Teaneck. They were going to use an Ashkenazi guy, and in the end they said they didn't want it to look like an act of revenge.
I heard about this
So
recently.
they said, who could be the most detached from the Shoah? They found this Taimani guy. Like, the Yemenites have to do with the war. So
Was there like a documentary about him or something like that?
I don't know about the Taimani guy himself.
Yeah.
Well, don't know, but very sweet guy. Anyway, yeah. So he was, by the way, he debated if he should make a bracha before he did it.
I think
Actually, the
that's
bracha, but no, al mihiyah zichar amalek. He's like, I might be, Rav Khalil told you might be the only man in our generation who had the zechut of actually literally erasing the memory of Amalek from
Tobiansky.
under the
Then
Tobiansky.
was executed also in the
Firing squad.
was it a treason?
Treason.
Yeah, must have been. There are only 4 things I think that would make you eligible. It's
treason, genocide.
yeah, genocide, acts of war, aiding and abetting the enemy. I think respectively treason, but.
But he was posthumously exonerated.
yeah.
Oh, great.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Listen, man, you gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet. It is what it is. So that's the long and short of commenting or critiquing on public individuals or individuals who have public responsibility. I'm going to add one more feature to this, and that is that I want you to know this is very true of politicians in general, and it's true really of most public figures. These individuals are creatures of stimulus and response, pretty much like every other person out there. In other words, politicians generally don't act. You have to assume it's like Newton's first law of physics, that a body at rest tends to stay at rest unless acted upon by some outside force. Meaning, politicians don't do anything until they're absolutely compelled to. They just don't like to. They have there's a certain laziness that comes with being a politician where status quo is always fun, and changing it requires effort. And sometimes you have a certain inhibition, or there's a certain obstacle that you have to get over. If we didn't hold politicians publicly accountable, if we didn't protest, if we didn't, put pressure on them through public media, through actual physical protest, by making our opinions and our voices heard, they would never do anything. They would never change. This is something I've noticed now, especially since this last third knife intifada, whatever they're calling it, that there are actually organizations in Israel that are committed to following and harassing the anti-Semitic media. So CNN, BBC, and Reuters have all issued retractions of some of the crazy stories and the crazy misleading titles that they've published about the news in Israel. Obviously, the damage is already done. The point, though, is that were it not for this pressure, they would keep on doing it. They would keep on doing it. They would get away with it. When you apply this pressure to people, you can actually change their behavior. And the point that I'm making is that there really is an aspect of pikuach nefesh, of saving lives, when you force the politicians to be accountable, right? They don't want to use any kind of military force or military response that'll get them critiqued by other people. So it's very easy for them to capitulate to the international pressure and to ignore the citizens who appointed them to protect and to defend them. If the citizens themselves don't make their voices heard, if they don't publicly castigate these people for being derelict in their responsibilities to protect the nation, no one else is going to do it for them, right? France isn't going to get upset and say, really, Israel should protect its own citizens. No, they're all going to do is criticize them like the anti-Semites that they are. So it's necessary for us to apply these pressures. My point is, I don't want people to hesitate and say, really, because of the halachot of Leshon Hara, I should let the politicians do whatever they want and get away with it, even if it's a bloody murder. We have to be responsible. We have to be responsive. If you see people are abusing the power of their office, or if they're just not using it, if you see that there are people who can actually have a material, significant influence over the situation and change it for the better, and for some reason aren't doing that, or on the contrary, they're using their office and their power only to make the situation worse, we do have an obligation to speak up and to speak out. We have an obligation to apply these pressures. It's also very important for the perpetrators of crimes to know that we're going to pursue them. If they thought they could get away with this and that no one would say anything, unfortunately this is true in certain communities. We'll talk about this whole concept of when it's okay to turn someone over to the secular authorities. So if you suspect that someone's guilty of domestic abuse or of abusing children or of any other misdemeanor or felony, where exactly do you draw the line and say, you know what, it doesn't sound like a nice thing to do, but maybe this person does need to be incarcerated in order to protect society from them, if not them from themselves. It's not like necessarily like it used to be. In antiquity, that was very frowned upon, and people who did this were generally excommunicated. Not so clear that in today's society that still applies.
What about like just Jewish celebrities, not politicians, speaking out against, but like anyone who's Jewish, the way people talk about it?
Yeah.
Or scandals, that are
No,
in the newspaper.
it's a really good question. I don't personally know that many celebrities.
There's tons of Jewish celebrities.
No, I know that there are lots of them. Sure, I could name
I know a lot of
bunch.
people who
But I
think
mean,
they're
whether or not you
celebrities.
know them personally.
Right. No, I'm saying so.
So had
The,
an affair with so and so, is that what you're saying?
yeah, it gets a little bit dicey. The reason I said that is because you really have to wonder. It's not so clear what the celebrity's intentions are when they say certain things or when they do certain things. For example, there are certain celebrities that can't get enough of themselves and that really enjoy being very public about everything they do. So every dress that she wears, every new hairstyle or new facial hair thing.
Making it all public, it's not a problem. What if
Well,
it's
if
not public?
it's something very public and it's something that's out there in the open, chances are
Bless you.
it's not a secret. The question only would be what's the practical.
If the person doesn't want it to be public, maybe the person doesn't want it.
So here already the Chafetz Chaim is strict, and he says, look, if you know for a fact it's something that they don't want made public, even if someone else is making it public, you shouldn't necessarily be party to the.
Bless you.
So what he says is, if someone has something that they would prefer be kept secret. So let's say really bad news came out about some celebrity. So the point that he makes is that even if it's public, you have you're halachically entitled to suspect it of being true, but that's not to say it's the same thing as you have a halachic obligation to pass the information on. Right? So if, for example, something came out about a certain celebrity that he or she went to rehab, give you a really good example, right? Someone checked into rehab, so it's not a very flattering situation. That it's hard to keep it secret, but it could be a positive thing. It could be a positive development. It could be looked at as a negative development. So either I lost control of my life and my lifestyle, which is how I ended up where I am, and why I can't solve this problem on my own, and I was forced by a judge, to check into rehab. Or it could be that I came to my own senses, I came to my conclusions that I want help, I want this to change, I'm trying to be responsible, and this was the responsible thing to do. So you could look at it one of two ways. The question is only, what's the nature of the situation and what's your relationship to it. If this is a celebrity that you despise and you can't stand anything that she or he does, and whatever they do, you just so that's one thing. If you have personal feelings about it, it really depends what your goal is. If you personally despise someone because this person is debaucherous or damaging or just no role model for anybody to follow, and they make their debauchery public, it might not be a big deal to publicize this. I wasn't really into the Michael Jackson, like, little boys thing, I'll be honest with you. When I heard that, I got a little bit bugged out. So, yes, it's nice that you like to donate to children's charities. Not so cool that not so kosher things were happening there. So, I would say, look, whether or not you think this is appropriate, society doesn't. That's got to stop. That's really not cool. I don't approve of you and your lifestyle, and I'll go so far as to say this needs to be publicly addressed.
If they want it private.
If it's something they want public,
They
like
want private.
recently I remember seeing, if something they want private, here the Chafetz Chaim admits that it depends on how you understand the Gemara. If it was publicized in front of 3 people, which means 3 people know about it, and it wasn't hidden from them, he holds that some opinions hold, that's it, it's considered public and it's fair game. As an opinion that holds no, that's only if it was done in front of 3 people so as to publicize the fact. So if celebrity A got engaged to celebrity B, then normally it's like you publicize things like that. Or if you told your best friends or your parents, then like everyone else is going to know. If it's something not so positive or not so nice to have publicized about you, he holds that even if it's public but it wasn't meant to be publicized and it's still damaging, that you should be careful about it and prefer not to count it.
But he acknowledges that not everyone holds that way, I guess.
Yeah. He tends towards stricture, and he says because the situation isn't really resolved, wherever we have a doubt when it comes to Leshon Hara, we should keep it to ourselves. But he acknowledges that you have the right to suspect it. So, for example, to use Michael Jackson as an example, because I'm not really into pedophilia, once it became fairly public knowledge that there were already 2 trials, I mean, there were 2 accusations or 3, I don't remember how many in the end, but there were 2 separate accusations, and I think one of them was settled out of, I think both were settled out of court. So, while I might not necessarily have a mitzvah to go around telling everybody I know that this guy is a pedophile, he says I'm certainly well within my rights to believe this may be the case, to suspect this might be the case, and let's say not send my kids to his daycare, like to his birthday parties, or whatever. So he makes a distinction between where you have a moral obligation to get up and speak out and publicize. This is very debaucherous, and people who behave like this, we distance ourselves from, and we educate our kids not to be like them. And there are situations where, I don't know if I would run around waving a banner or like take a full page out of the New York Times, but I would still be concerned that this probably might be true and that I should be careful around this person. If there are allegations that he's, crooked in his business practices, then maybe I won't invest with him. And if there's allegations that he's, in inappropriate relationships with women or children or men or whatever, then I can suspect that's the case.
What about in a criminal case?
Which, by the way, would be a sort for you to do otherwise. Meaning, if someone comes and tells you something out of the blue that's not necessarily verifiable, it's not so clear that you have the right, quote unquote, to believe it unqualified and just assume that it's a fact. Very interesting thing. But I've seen situations like that. I know a story personally, a very bizarre situation, but this relative of mine that actually happens to be the same relative. That's really weird. But, well, he has a knack for getting himself into curious situations. So I'm not going to give you his name. So he came from Israel. He worked here for a couple of years, and then he moved down south. And while he was there, he was taken in by a very, very, very wealthy Jewish family, right? Because all Jews are wealthy because they all own the banks. So it's French conspiracy theory day. So he was taken in by a very, very wealthy, influential couple. This guy collects like letters signed by George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. He's up there. He goes to auctions for these things. So one day this guy's wife comes home and she finds a letter written apparently by some other woman, basically saying, "I'm so sorry, I didn't know he was married, he never told me," like, whatever. Now, this relative of mine tells me that he was with this guy every day for a couple of years. There's no way, he's telling me this could not possibly have happened because I was there with him almost every minute of every day. So probably it was some woman who was trying to extort money from him or something, and he was an older guy at the time too. And his wife is never going to forget this because no matter how much he promises her that it didn't happen, no matter what he says to her, there's just this dirty little seed that's planted somewhere in her mind that, this may be true, it may have happened. So something like that, there might actually be, as funny as it sounds, a halachic imperative to ignore it to the best of your ability, and to not to change your behavior or your attitude towards someone who might otherwise be innocent. So it's not fair to say the guy's guilty without a trial, without any evidence, without any proofs to the contrary. It's just that it's a very difficult thing to do. Practically, to say, I'm going to pretend I didn't read that letter is really, really hard. So there are situations in which you can suspect something is being true. There are situations in which you can act on it. You can alter your behavior and even speak and publicize the fact. There are situations in which, if it's baseless, or you suspect that it was said or propagated by someone who's got a negative impression of this person, then you really need to combat it and try not even to believe it, yourself. So we're a little bit late tonight. Sorry about that. God's help.